if we want to go deeper, I think there's a Neoplatonic tradition as to why the Trinity occurred. And I'm kind of familiar and in sympathy with it.
Aristotelian, not Neoplatonist.
Well,
I would agree that there's going to be some Neoplatonic notions of justice or what is considered just, but in terms of the metaphysics or theological claims of the Trinity, it's going to be based on the Aristotelian works of the fathers explicated within the biblical data. My point is basically to assert that persons commit actions or are able to do things qua or index to their nature. So the Father, who is God, is all-powerful because he possesses the nature of being God. You're assuming in your argument that the person of Christ is limited and unlimited in respect to his divinity, committed as an action within God's nature.
Action.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, sir. Yeah,
I confirm that I do discussions online as it pertains to the discussion.
He's appeared on something before.
He knows me. I've done.
Right.
I've done a chunk of this here for quite a while, so I didn't just browse it. Okay?
Fair enough. I don't know who people are. I barely know names, to be
It's
fair.
okay. It's not a problem.
So what exactly?
I didn't know we were going to do a camera. Okay.
Well, no, here's the thing.
Can I have a mic if we're going to?
I can hold it between.
That's powerful.
I can hold it between us if you wish.
Okay, fine.
So, firstly, what is exactly going to be the entailed issues with the Trinity? And whenever you pose an issue, I'm just going to give a few accounts within different church traditions on how this is ultimately resolved.
If you wanted to give church traditions, that's fine. If you could try as much as possible to focus on the logic of the thing in and of itself, the argument.
What
itself,
I mean by this,
rather than what
I mean by this
say.
is logic is just going to be appealing to notions to which you explicate within your introduction of what you're saying. I'm going to be appealing to this and demonstrate that the different traditions within the church itself are going to give accounts of refutation of the Trinity.
We can cut out the middleman. You can just give me the logic, okay?
Okay.
I don't
know what you mean by give the logic. You're idiosyncratically using the word as if it's something that really exists, or as if it's something which is definitionally true.
If we're going to have a discussion, all I'm saying is I'd like to attempt to have a logical discussion.
Okay.
Is that a reasonable
I think this is going to be entailed in the way I dialogue. So, what?
Is that a reasonable
Yeah, that's
aspiration?
fine.
Okay, great. So we're going to try and have a logical discussion.
Yes.
The thing that it seems we're going to discuss is the Trinity.
Yes.
I didn't say let's go on camera. It's just happened, but whatever. That's fine.
Well, whatever question or contention you have within the Christian worldview, other atheists and Muslims are going to have issue with. So the reason why I asked you, do you want this to be on camera, is because it's a good platform to vocalize the contentions with the faith that I'm attempting to explicate as logical.
Fine. I'm not saying I object to being on camera. I've been on camera quite a time.
So what is the entailed issues with the Trinity?
That it is prima facie illogical.
Okay, when you say illogical, what do you mean?
What do you... Okay, we're going to have to share the questions, but for now, fine. Illogical, it's inconsistent. You have something which is simultaneously claiming to be infinite and finite, okay? That's a contradiction which contradicts Plato's proof. Hang on.
Yeah.
Which we're looking, assuming we believe in the principle of self-consistency, yes, then prima facie, in other words, just on first impression, it's reasonable for somebody to go, hang on a minute, you're telling me something can be finite and infinite. So I think a healthy, intuitive reaction when you first hear it is to go, that doesn't sound right, which I think is the effect a lot of Muslims get.
Well, if you remove one second, because you said you were going to have a shared question, then move to a bit more of a formalized dialogue in terms of your argument. So when you say, for example, that it is a negation and an affirmation of what you're predicating of the subject, if you're saying that intuitively, that's going to be an entailed contradiction, I agree, but we have something called a relative contradiction, where opaque context offers the possibility that it is not a logical contradiction.
Okay, right.
What I mean by, hold on, what I mean...
No. You're using a lot of long words and things, okay, which, if that's what you do, is what you do. I did say prima facie, yes?
Yes.
Which means on the surface. All I was trying to do at the moment was trying to get an agreement that under the surface things can be very different from how they look on the surface, yeah? And you may have deeper arguments which counteract the prima facie impression. But the prima facie impression to most reasonable people would be, I think, an infinite thing can't be a finite thing.
But would you agree that this assertion, if given context, can be negated as a contradiction?
I think you're welcome to try it. And it
So
might
for example, I'm going to give you. Can I give you an
Hang
example?
on, I'll move to the deeper analysis, just as long as we agree on the surface appearance.
Well, no,
I'm not saying the
because
surface appearance proves the point.
because when you appeal to like a surface notion that this is going to be true, when I say a negation and an affirmation, it entails a contradiction. But if we look at the greater context, it negates that proposition. I feel like you saying that it's going to be a fact of the conversation, that intuitively this is going to be wrong, is just assuming too much in your argument, that there isn't going to be context to negate your argument in terms of this being a contradiction.
I'm not saying anything.
So I've got an example.
I'm not saying anything.
I've got an example of what I am suggesting. So, for example, if I were to say that I'm dead and alive, intuitively, by your own notions, this would be a logical contradiction, correct?
Correct.
But let's say I add some opaque context and say that I'm dead indexed to a video game and alive indexed to my bodily being. This is no longer a contradiction because I've introduced context.
I'm not saying that's not the case. All I was seeking was an initial agreement.
So instead of getting semantical, let's just pose the argument towards the
I'm not
Trinity.
getting semantical. I'm trying to progress from foundational assumptions, okay? I start from base axioms and work up, and I try and start a conversation from a point of agreement, no matter how basic. Okay?
I mean,
that's all. Because
axioms.
Then you can
Well,
track
firstly,
where you
axioms
start to diverge.
axioms have to be justified, right? So your initial axioms.
Obviously.
Well, no, not really, because you possessing axioms doesn't have to be justified by priors, but you employing them as a brute fact within an argument has to be justified when critiquing my position.
Oh, sorry. Do you not accept the validity of axioms?
No, right? Well, axioms are just the.
If you don't, we're obviously going to have a problem.
Well,
because
no,
logic
axioms.
predicates on axioms.
Well, hold on. I agree with axioms, right? Non-referential truth claims. They are true because they are true, and they're going to be our first principles on how we explain and give an account for our own existence.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you say for something that something's axiomatic, that's going to have to be justified when you're committing an argument.
When did I ever say it wouldn't?
Because you're saying that you start with axioms, and I was just clarifying that you're going to have to give justifications for the thing
What I'm
themselves.
saying is, I try and build arguments from a foundational axiom upwards, yeah, and try and discuss a point where you can get points of agreement initially at the foundational level. Yeah, like, can we agree we're probably both here having a conversation? Yes?
So, well, there's the foundational axiom, which is going to be
Can we agree with
we're
that?
having a conversation,
Yeah,
correct?
it seems very, very, very likely we're both here having a conversation.
So, like, what is going to be the foundational axiom upon your critique on the Trinity?
My foundational assumption right now, my foundational assumption will be deeper. I'm making a prima facie observation to try and get us on the same page. The prima facie observation was, it does seem initially counterintuitive. That doesn't prove it's wrong. I'm not saying it proves it's wrong. I'm just asking if you're of a mindset where you can understand. Let me give you a parallel
A
argument.
prima facie isn't going to be axiomatic if the justification itself has priors and is referential
I'll
itself.
come to the axiom after. We'll use the axioms to scratch under the surface. I'm just trying to get the surface agreement that the reason we're going to have to apply axioms and go deeper than the surface is because you hold a particular view and it's going to need analysis, and I may hold a different view. I'd just like to agree that we start from a common point of going, yeah, on the surface it seems strange. Let me give you an analogy which I'm pretty sure you'll agree with. The notion, sorry, I'm not trying to annoy Muslims here, but I'm just going to use it for the minute. The notion of Muhammad at the age of 50-something having sex with a 9-year-old, prima facie, I think most healthy-minded people will go, hang on, that doesn't sound great, yeah? Now, if I talk to a Muslim, they will dig deeper, and they will give me, and they'll go, yeah, on the surface it might look
I don't
that
think
way.
that this
Is
is
that
going to be.
reasonable?
I don't think this is going to be a sufficient principle in a critique of a religion because your argument assumes too much. So, for example, when a Christian is committing the polemic of Aisha's age, yeah, that's fine. When a Christian commits a polemic against Aisha's age, it's going to have to grant the assumption
You're not
of.
willing to agree that on the surface a 55-year-old
I
having sex
disagree.
with a 9-year-old might seem like a red flag. You don't think that's a good
Without
prima facie
assuming a
assumption?
position and without referring to other sources. Like,
Okay.
again, I agree. A
We now
conclusion.
have, I believe, and I don't want to misrepresent your position, I thought I said something starkly non-controversial.
Yeah.
Because it looks like you're not willing to say that on the surface a 55-year-old having sex with a 9-year-old would appear superficially to be problematic.
Yes,
Are you
because
not?
well, I would agree that if you suppose a position within a moral framework, that this is going to be disgusting and vile. But I don't. I'm not agreeing
asking you to
that
agree.
prima facie is going to be a sufficient principle in the critique of Aisha and Muhammad's
Okay,
marriage.
let me make it very clear. I am not arguing that prima facie assumptions are either axioms or that they're ultimate ways of finding truth.
Okay, so then-
what I am saying
so
is that when you're having a
I think we're
conversation
getting
with someone-
stumped. Hold on. I think we're getting stumped on this initial first step in our argument. So how about you pose the main critique of the Trinity, and then we can grant or either negate this super.
Well, I actually already did, but because you didn't want to accept it, I retreated into the position of prima facie, just trying to get a basic level of agreement. Well, what I'm asking is, are you a human being who intuitively can't grasp why people might, on the surface, find the Trinity problematic? Is that who you are?
Because I don't believe God is going to pay any. I don't think the notions of God, which bear into reality, are going to be contingent upon subjective observation of whether it's logical or not.
So you have no empathy with people's initial reaction.
I have empathy, but it pays no bearing in a formal discussion on the logics of the Trinity.
I'm not saying it did. I'm just trying to work out who I'm talking
So,
to.
if you're speaking to a formalized critique on the Trinity, we're not going to care or concern ourselves with on what other people say of the Trinity due to a lack of ignorance or a different theological position or
hi.
scholastic definition of the words we're
Okay,
using.
hi, what's your name?
Young, they call me Young Bob here.
Okay, Bob, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Tony, right?
Yeah.
I'm just for the minute trying to make a vague human connection to see if we're intuitively on the same page. That's all. Now, I would hope...
I disagree with you.
Okay, I would hope we would be intuitively on the page that a 55-year-old having sex with a 9-year-old sounds like a red flag. And I would hope, I hope we share that intuition. And it may be wrong. There may be very profound
Well, if you're
arguments.
speaking of, for example, me having intuition, I can come to the conclusion through nature or something other than the paradigm to which I hold to, that it's wrong to do this. I agree, but I don't believe that this can be used within a formal debate of whether the Trinity is logical or
Neither
not.
do I for the third
So
time.
why have you brought it up?
Because I want to know I'm on the same intuitive level as you at a fundamental human level, because if we're not, we won't be able to have a constructive conversation. So I'm trying to find the common ground point. I'm trying to find some statements we can say that we can agree on at
But
a
I
starting
thought the
point,
whole point of
and
the
then we
debate-
can build out.
So I thought the whole point of the debate is just going to be to find where our indifferences lead us and demonstrate that our differences in terms of our position is going to be more probable than not true,
but-
or negate the other person's differences to our paradigm.
I know, I'm afraid you assumed that. Because I've done a lot of this, I've discovered and noticed that, for example, if I'm discussing a 55-year-old having sex with a 9-year-old with a human being, and that human being doesn't experience the initial sense of that sounds like a problem, then I can't trust that person's judgment.
I disagree. I agree that yes, people are going to be intuitively contingent upon social conditions come to the conclusion that this can be wrong. But again, people hold to suppositions that you're going to have to negate or prove, or themselves have to prove in order to come to a conclusion. For example, someone who says that this is correct is either going to appeal to an argument of presentism or appeal to an argument that it is within their moral framework or their God's ontology, therefore it is moral and permissible.
These are arguments which, and before I try and get to any of these arguments, I'm just trying to establish if you're a person who intuitively shares the same thoughts.
What do you mean by intuition?
What do you think I mean by intuition?
Intuition is just going...
The pre-analytical response to something based on your unconscious induction and experience of life so far. Okay?
Yeah, like,
Something
I'll
that.
be honest, yes, I will come to certain conclusions through this initial process, but obviously after the mind, or once I then research further into what the argument actually entails, I can change my position, and the data posed within the argument is going to, again, override my intuition.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, please play this back, because for the fourth time, I mentioned the third time, now for the fourth time I'm saying, I am not saying that the anti-Trinity argument...
Okay, so you've heard my position on what you're saying. You said that you wanted... Yeah,
for the fourth
because...
time, I am not arguing that a prima facie response is a counter-argument. I am simply trying to find a human level of connection because sometimes I get quite good discussions with people here, okay? People I don't agree with, but we still make progressive discussions.
You're going to
okay?
disagree with me on this notion, right? I can agree that I come to...
Actually, strangely enough, you don't even know that. I'm actually going to disagree less than you think I'm going to disagree. You've jumped in assuming that's my position. My position is there's more nuance to this, and as it happens, I'm essentially a Unitarian, and as it happens, I think that, frankly, you're just worrying about small print, which is not really very important, and it's been made a big thing, and it's not actually a core ethical or teleological issue. I think for the point of contention and cameras and discussions with Muslims, it's been turned into that, but I don't think
Well, the issues on the Trinity.
Yeah, the issue on the Trinity, as far as I'm concerned, is actually not a particularly big deal one way or the other, okay?
Wait, so like when you say you're a Unitarian, what account of Unitarianism do you give? Are you a modalist? Are you a oneness? Do you pose that the Father is only God?
Okay. I believe Jesus was a man.
Just a man.
No, it's more subtle than that. Jesus is a man where all human beings, Jesus was a human being who was endowed with the Spirit of God, as all people are.
So you're an Arian.
Put whatever label you want on it, I'm not sure that
So like,
follows.
so
I'm an Arian.
are you an Arian in the case of believing that highly venerating Jesus as some sort of thing other than human?
Do I get to finish what I was saying?
Well, I'm just trying to
No,
reconfirm
but you interrupt.
what you'd be formally considered.
You might have a better idea if you let me get to the end of the sentence.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, it can work that way, believe me. Okay, so everybody is human. Jesus was human. Everybody is endowed with what let's call loosely a spirit, a soul. Yes. Is that reasonable? Jesus also had a soul, but that Jesus epitomized the very best ethics that human nature was possible to. So he represents the moral paradigm that human nature is capable of achieving. That's what's important.
I agree, besides from the exclusive statement that he's just a man.
Well,
I'd
okay,
agree.
the word just, he's a man, so it just sounds denigrating. I believe it's a human being who epitomizes what the transcendent
Okay.
nature of spirit can do with human nature, and hence it's entirely correct to venerate him. So I'm a fan of Christianity in that sense, and I'm not here to knock it, okay? I think following a moral paragon is a really good idea. Jesus is an excellent moral paragon. Therefore, I'm good. And getting stuck in the small print of the Trinity and the Council of Nicaea versus Unitarian, to me is...
Well, what I would say is that a Unitarian, if we suppose the Christian paradigm to be true, is going to be insulting God, which is blasphemous, right?
Okay, well, I'm sorry that you have what I take to be a slightly more fundamentalist position than I think is conducive to the spirit of Christianity.
Well, the spirit of Christianity is love your neighbor, correct?
Yep, that would sound
One
good.
of the reducible statements which Jesus posits within his ministry. Now, what I define love is looking out for one's best interest. So, for example...
Oh, hang on, that's very specific. Looking out for your own best interest is love.
No, the person's interest to which you love.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. So if that is the case, you would then agree that if I believe your position is spiritually dead, that in your best interest it is to come to the fullness of the faith.
Yeah, if you genuinely believe that you can improve somebody's life, then it is a positive thing to do to try and share that information with them as best you can in good faith and good spirit. That's terrific.
My Christian
Okay?
fundamentalist
you
view...
should also be aware that when you're doing it, you might be getting a certain amount of ego satisfaction.
I agree.
Okay.
For whatever I say that can get someone towards Christ, it can also get someone away from
Well,
Christ.
whether it moves them or not, what I'm saying is people have multiple motives for doing things, right? Now, one motive can be, I would like to show someone a better way of living, so I can have that as a motive. That can exist in parallel with, I also quite like telling people that I am something of an authority on this. That's good for my ego. And then also I might go, hey, I can make some money through camera crews, and I've got an income stream. And all three of those motives can run simultaneously.
Yeah,
Now,
like-
I wouldn't want to deny those, but I would hope that always the primary motive would be looking after the person.
I mean, like in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, it says that man does not achieve saving grace by works with and of himself, right? So
No.
I can't be on God's good grace by just shouting at people on the camera, nor do I make any money or any financial benefit from the content to which I make on Soko's channel, nor do I see any social benefit. No, I don't. I come here weekly, right?
Okay, then I applaud that. If you don't, I genuinely congratulate. I'm being serious.
None of these
If
SoCo
this young man is
speakers.
doing this and there is no monetary connection, it's worth people knowing that. And congratulations.
So actually, this is a good time to address. So I don't know on JC's finances, but the CPM on YouTube content, and I don't know if you know this because I used to do a bit of freelance work on YouTube. The CPM, or how much a YouTube video gets per 1,000 views, is incredibly low when it comes to religious content. In fact, if you look at the YouTube brackets, it's going to be like a penny per 1,000 views. So religious content, even if I was making money, it's not a lot. But none of these SoCo speakers, David, Bob, any of them here, make any money in terms of the content that they would produce on Revelations or SoCo's camera. And I'm fine with that. I don't do religion, I don't even do debates because I like money. Rather, for whenever I was 14, 13, I always liked to speak to people in a debate fashion.
Good.
And now I'm 16 and I have a vocation in religion.
Okay. I respect your vocation. I'll assume it's sincere. I'm surprised that we're talking money. I just raised it as an example of multiple motives. You seem to have made a very overt statement about money, which I didn't expect. I'd just like to pin down what it meant, if you don't mind. It sounds like you're saying you don't directly or indirectly, so both options, directly or indirectly, garner any funds from doing this. Is that true?
Yeah, it's actually more expensive me being here because I have to take the train to London every single week.
Okay, in that case, I would shake your hand if you didn't have a mic in it, irrespective of what religion you're promoting.
Yeah.
I totally respect that in terms of motive, because I think motive is the essence of ethics. So congratulations. Now, hopefully we've got a little bit of common ground here. I'm simply pitching that I think the core message of Christianity is so solvent, because it's pointing a finger at a moral paradigm, that it's actually deflecting people's attention away from it by over-intellectualizing it into arguments about Trinities and Unitarian and whatever, because Christianity is not the beauty of Christianity to me. And I'm a Universalist, so I see merit in... No, well, it means I'm on board with your one as well.
No, I'm just doing it ironically. I'm not doing it as
fine. Right. So, I'm a Universalist, so it's very rare that I'll take a particular religion and go, that's just rubbish. I mean, Scientology, Satanism, fine. Apart from that, I assume that the major traditions of the world will be carrying some divine inspiration.
So let me get this right. So you would believe that, for example, my intention of trying to get you to a church is going to be virtuous, but the actual action within and of itself isn't going to be good because you take a universal approach in terms of faith, that if you generally believe that something is true and you commit to the action within faith, it is going to be good by the eyes of God.
Yeah, hang on. I believe if you lead people to... I think there's various perspectives you can take on any given ideology or faith, okay? Some are more constructive than others. There's always an optimum point of perspective. If you can lead someone towards a more optimum view of Christianity, great. I believe it can enhance their life and it can be a good thing. I simultaneously believe that if there are people who can lead you towards a more optimized view of Islam or Judaism or Buddhism, it can enhance their lives as well. Okay? Well, so to me, it's not like one or the other. It's like God speaks to everyone through all time, to all people, always has done, always will, and human beings will inevitably, because we're finite, fallible entities, we will end up culturally distorting things and twisting them into wish fulfillment prophecies and misunderstanding things, and that's natural and that's okay. It doesn't mean the essence of the message isn't good. So if you're able to communicate, and more to the point, not intellectually communicate, but actually live the good example. If you primarily are able to live the good example, and if you're doing this without making any money, then I'd say you are living the good example, then congratulations. It's more important that you walk the walk than talk the talk.
I agree. In the book of James, it speaks about teachers being held to a higher standard. So, of course, if speakers at the corner, for example, are lukewarm Christians, or are primarily incentivized by making money and that's why they come here, they're going to be judged accordingly on Judgment Day. Now, my real issue is that although I will concede that there is a respectability in someone who is ignorant but still believes to live a life of a faith in a dedicated manner, I believe that if you can assert that my God exists within reality, it's then going to posit that whatever is said negatively of this God in terms of negating its attributes, it's just going to be a matter of blasphemy.
Oh, when I have a discussion, I don't want to be tarnished with words like blasphemy. It's very prejudicial and it doesn't help. If within your faith you consider something blasphemy, but I mean, we're not going to use that as an intellectual arguing point.
It is, because what we get, our metaphysical framework, our meta-ethical framework, our theological account of God is all going to be extrapolated within the biblical data itself. And also, just because something is prejudicial, right?
It's a long way of saying you're going to be logical. Yeah.
Well, in terms of what I'm saying, and in close and in line with the church as possible.
Right. Okay. So I believe it was roughly a long way of saying you're going to be logical.
Yeah.
Logic means you're going to use inference. Inference is induction plus deduction plus faith.
Correct.
Okay. There we go. So we've nailed the whole thing now. We're going to use that tool. Inference, induction plus deduction, based on a faith. Hang on. Let me finish. Based on a faith that we live in a self-consistent universe, yeah?
Well, I am going to employ...
Square circle.
Yeah. So I am going to employ inference rules, agreed.
Okay, great. So we're going to use inference. It's terrific. Now, I put it to you as I put it to Muslims or anyone else. The tools that we have at our disposal are inference,
Yes.
anecdotal information, and empirical data.
Yes.
And core intuitions.
Yes.
Okay, so I take where you have these four things. And whenever I'm in these videos, and I just bang on about this because it just anchors the whole discussion, okay?
Yes.
And I take it that the least reliable information is anecdotal information. That doesn't mean it's not often very, very correct, okay? Anecdotally, you believe something will be playing at the cinema this evening. Chances are it's right, okay? But it's anecdotal. If you then go to the cinema and you look empirically and it's not on there, you can conclude reasonably that your empirical information trumps the anecdotal information. Yes?
I don't think there's going to be some naturally anecdotal evidence is always going to be weaker than empirical.
Good. That's all. If we can
it's just
agree
going to
on
be
that.
in context to what we're saying.
For sure. But if we can agree in that hierarchy, which thank you for going this far. Good. I mean, I've discussed this with other people, but if we can. So the empirical trumps the anecdotal. Yeah.
In some senses, yes.
Yeah. Usually, there are exceptions. And then you've got the tool of inference. Inference has got, in the absence, it's like conceptualization. Mathematics would be inferential using logic. It's stuff you can do in your own head without any external data, and it's not based on other people's anecdotes. Yeah. And most of the arguments for religion. In fact, I think all the arguments for religion are essentially using a combination of anecdotal evidence and inference, not empirical. If I ask you what's your best empirical argument for Christianity, I think you're going to be coming up with virtually nothing. And I don't take that to be a criticism of Christianity.
Yeah.
I think it's inevitably the case, because the empirical evidence I need is show me Jesus, show me a miracle.
I would say it's almost a category error to say that in order to prove matters of history and supernaturalism, we're going to have to appeal to empirical evidence.
Hang on, I'm not saying I didn't say that. Sorry.
But that's my initial.
Okay. With respect, you're now not hearing me or misrepresenting what I said. I'm saying that when we discuss religion...
Yeah, you're just asserting the format of evidence that one would appeal to in proving the existence.
I'm saying we have a menu of tools we can use when discussing religion.
Yes.
And...
Sorry about this.
In this discussion, we're basically using inference, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. We have very little access to, in fact, none as far as what's your best empirical evidence. I don't think you really have any. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that the onus is on you to discuss it within an inferential term.
Well, I'm not going to mention any because obviously, like for examples, the evidence is posed within the traditions of the church I'm just not well learned in. So why would I attempt to argue something I don't know of? That's just going to be my truest account. I obviously know of things which are posited as empirical evidence of history.
Sorry, no, history. No, you're missing it. History is anecdotal. Your understanding of history, because we're looking at it from where you are and where I am. From where I am, the entirety of history is anecdotal evidence. Okay, everything. Henry VIII, Battle of Hastings, it's all anecdotal.
Well,
okay?
would you not say the evidence of this history is just going to be found within the archaeological evidence, or like?
Thank you. Yes. At which point it becomes empirical, doesn't it? At which point
Yeah,
you physically
exactly,
dig
and that's what I was
something
referring to.
Fine. So that is where you get the empirical interface to corroborate the anecdotal evidence. Yeah.
I agree.
And then you also use inference to cross-reference and see if it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. And all I'm saying is that for all religions, if I ask them for their best empirical argument, they don't really have much.
Besides from like appealing to like referring to evident like events within empirical data to pose like a PSR or contingency argument.
PSR?
Principle of sufficient reason. For everything that exists.
Is that a way of going, what I'm asking you is a very simple question.
Yeah, so like what I mean is...
I'm asking you a very simple question. What is your best, and this isn't me knocking Christianity, because I think whatever faith, as a Universalist, any religion I talk to will be in the same conundrum. I don't think any particular religion has got particularly strong empirical argument. They have inferential arguments and anecdotal arguments. Okay?
Yeah, so like I'm just going to say that the theological arguments, like the principle of sufficient reason towards an existence of a God, is just going to be principles which map onto reality. Like, for example, when Thomas Aquinas uses the argument of motion within his 5 ways, he's obviously going to demonstrate that all things are in motion by using empirical evidence, right?
Yeah.
Motion.
Yeah. He is using the empirical evidence in order to corroborate an inference. Okay?
Yeah.
He's then going to use the inference to argue for God. He's not using the empirical evidence as direct evidence.
Do you agree, though, that all 3 areas of evidence are going to reflect and complement each other?
Yeah, ideally they're in a synthesis. The problem being, like, if we want to have discussions right here and now, we can do it anecdotally. I can ask people, is there a guy behind the camera or not? Empirically, I can touch him, I can touch you, and then we can.
But
use
what I mean by
inferences,
complement,
yeah?
like what I mean by it being complementary. Let's say, for example,
I'm agreed with you.
let's say like there's a camera here. It records me. You try to corroborate me being here by this video. You have the video, you experiencing that video is going to be empirical. You corroborating eyewitness testimony, for example, the cameraman here, that I was here making this video, that's going to be anecdotal.
We move away from that.
That's going to be anecdotal. And the inference going to be made is because we can see, and it's going to be like a deductive argument, because we can see myself in the video and corroborate through other people saying that I was in this video, we can now deduce that I was the one here right now in this video.
We're saying we have 3 tools available. Actually, I think we have 4. We have a primary intuition. Okay?
I would reject that, but whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, then I think the primary intuition manifests as I am. Okay? I think I am is an unavoidably true intuition, which is not an inference.
Oh, I agree that this is going to be like
It's
non-referential, yeah.
It's not anecdotal.
Sorry, I'm trying to warm myself up if I'm being weird.
It's okay, it's fine. I could do it with you. Okay, so I am is not an anecdotal piece of information. It is not an inference because it's got no moving parts. It's not part of a syllogism. Nor is it empirically the case. It is pre-empirical. So I think I am is the most certain thing in this hierarchy, right? Now all I'm saying is, when we're discussing religion, you guys, your best empirical argument is pretty much non-existent. And that needs to be understood at the platform. Whereas if you're talking science, the scientists can always take you to a lab and do empirical experiments,
I agree.
which gives them a certain edge. So when the empirical data corroborates the inferential, you have to give it some respect. And religion will always be slightly hamstrung by the fact that because it's dealing with abstractions and qualia and consciousness and souls and metaphysics, it can't provide the same empirical feedback and predictions, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we're at the level of inference, yeah? Great. So now we're going to use the logic to talk about the Trinity, and all I said was I think prima facie, to me, the idea that an infinite thing is simultaneously finite seems prima facie.
And he's speaking of Christ.
But anything, I'm just taking the general thing that it represents. The Trinity represents an example, it would seem, if I'm interpreting it correctly, of a finite thing, of an infinite thing simultaneously being finite.
Are you speaking of Christ when you say this?
I'm
of the
talking,
Trinity?
yeah, I'm saying if I'm told the idea of the Trinity, which is there is an infinite God,
Yes.
and the infinite God manifests as a finite entity in a finite space, then my inferential intuition, and I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but you build up patterns of intuition about inferences.
Yeah.
My inferential intuition is that sounds like you're mixing apples and pears, mate. Yeah, and I think that's a good prima facie reaction. If we want to go deeper, I think there's a Neoplatonic tradition as to why the Trinity occurred, and I'm kind of familiar and in sympathy with it.
Aristotelian, not Neoplatonist.
Well,
I would agree that like there's going to be some like Neoplatonic notions of like justice or what is considered just, but in terms of like the metaphysics or theological claims of the Trinity, it's going to be based on the Aristotelian works of the fathers explicated within the biblical data, and just like saying that because this God exists within three persons, and this account allows for the possibility that it exists, it's going to be the way that we explicate God, because it's the only way that we can give an account of God itself. Now, in terms of...
Should we move this again?
Yeah, it's fine. In terms of...
We like just out the way.
Yeah. In terms of your issue, right, with saying
You got any light?
No,
You haven't got any light.
no. So, sorry for the people if it's dark. You're just going to have to see my dark face for a bit. So, in terms of, for example, you saying an infinite being cannot be finite and infinite at the same time.
Prima facie.
Yeah,
That seems reasonable.
instinctual, right? So instinctual is just going to be, we know that someone cannot do something against their nature. Do you believe that this is going to be the instinctual principle of
Hang on,
this?
I don't know that. I think people can do things which are against their nature.
No, what I mean by
Sorry,
this...
have you got any light?
It's alright, it's very powerful.
Oh, okay.
What I mean by this is, do you believe that the entailed contradiction is just going to be that God's ability is infinite, therefore there cannot be a negation at the same time of him being limited at the same time?
Oh, hang on. Now we're tapping into God's powers. So
Well, no,
what are we saying?
because we
God
know
has
that-
infinite power, he can overcome that logical
No,
objection.
no, that's not my point.
Okay.
My point is basically to assert that persons commit actions or are able to do things qua or indexed to their nature. So it's not. So we would say that young Bob walks because he's human.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're asserting that this ability is going to be indexed to the nature to which I possess. So you're saying that because God is, and God, when I outline God, is going to be the person and of the nature, God, let's just say the Father, because this is going to be a person that which we concede is going to be fully God. So the Father, who is God, is all-powerful because he possesses the nature of being God.
1 second, sorry. James! Sorry, I've been just 1 second.
That's fine.
James! You go to the pub after? See that, right. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so if we say that God the Father is all-powerful because he possesses the nature of God, right? This then can't be negated by saying the Father is limited and unlimited because of his human nature. Because of his divine nature, rather.
I think you are saying I think you are saying that because he's omnipotent, he can do anything, and therefore
No.
that supersedes.
I'm saying that
contradiction.
these two statements, that he's limited and unlimited, are going to be exclusively qua or in respect to the natures to which Christ possesses. So hypostatic union posits...
Do you want to try just? Never mind for me, for your audience, in terms of trying to use slightly more concise language, is there any way you can Occam's razor that down to a slightly
Okay,
more...
so natures are defined as sets of predicates, right? So
Sorry,
natures are defined as sets of predicates.
If you like, hang on.
Like, for example...
I haven't heard it stated specifically that way. The nature is a set of predicates.
Yeah, to which you substantiate or possess. So you're a human, and because you're a human, you have a human brain, human eyes.
So these are axiomatic.
I mean, you can argue that they're axiomatic.
I would argue that they're axiomatic. You're defining an axiom.
So, like, it's going to be definitionally true that a nature is just going to be sets of predicates. If that's your position, that's fine.
Yeah, an axiom is the root thing on which everything predicates. If you follow the chain of cause and effect that far enough.
Okay, so if we define that as the case, and you conceded that persons commit actions indexed to their nature, and I gave you the example of myself.
Persons commit actions
indexed to their nature. I'm only able to walk because I possess a nature which allows me to walk.
Oh, okay. But when you initialize, I'm happy with that. Beforehand, though, you seem to say, I think you said, or I thought I heard you say, people don't do things which are against their nature. That's not...
No, initially I said this, but then I kind of came to a self-actualization that this is an ambiguous using of the word, and can just be said, for example, that because I can walk doesn't mean I have
You
to.
find your argument on
Yeah.
the spot, yeah.
So-
okay, fine.
When we say that persons commit actions indexed to their nature,
Yeah.
you're assuming in your argument that the person of Christ is limited and unlimited in respect to his divinity, committed as an action within God's nature. But we...
Hang on, that's a massively convoluted way of, I'm sure there's easier ways to say this. I'm saying that the person who allegedly was nailed up on a cross occupied a finite location in space.
Qua his human nature.
Fine. That particular entity, which I take to be Jesus the man, or which I take to be Jesus Christ, okay?
Yeah.
Occupied a finite and limited location in space-time,
As
contrary to the nature of the omnipotent, omniscient
because
God.
this isn't an
That's all I'm
action.
saying.
This isn't an action committed within his divine nature. It's committed within his human nature.
Right, so there is a human nature at play.
Of Christ, yes.
Fine, okay, great, that's all I'm saying. So it actually becomes academic. We can then talk of just, there is a human nature at play. Fine.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, so this is why the Trinity becomes increasingly academic. And it's really frustrating to me because...
I mean, this is within the biblical data. Philippians chapter 2, verse 8,
Hang on.
it says
This
that
doesn't mean I've suddenly converted to the Trinity. I'm just arguing the whole thing, I think, is frankly academic and you should move on. And one of the reasons strategically I think you should move on. And I know that strategy isn't an argument for the logic or the truth of the thing, okay? But strategically, the amount of time, money and effort that Muslims get out of attacking Christians over the Trinity is terrifying, okay?
Yeah, it is.
And to me it's tragic because it's simply not the core of the piece at all. It's way out in the branches. It's human beings' intellectual attempt to understand something which is fundamentally transcendent and mystical.
But my
Okay?
position is that
But
you would
you're
agree.
entrenched that we have to
Yeah,
have the Trinity.
I see your position as someone who doesn't hold to both positions, but my way of thinking about it, and again, this is going to be backed by this idea that Christ can utilize, or God can utilize bad things and maximize goodness within that bad thing itself. What I mean by this is if Muslims are focusing on an academic point, but are not stupid, but are really, their refutations or their arguments are stupid, people can see that their position is going to be disingenuous in either stigmatizing the speaker, which is going to reflect upon a position, or is going to look favorably upon the people faithfully defending their position to which they believe is true.
Right, I disagree with that, which is why I raised the issue of prima facie. I think a reasonable prima facie response to a 55-year-old having sex with a 9-year-old is, hang on, that doesn't sound right. And I would expect anybody to have that response. If they can then intellectually explain to me why it's okay, maybe there's a deeper reason it's good. Ditto with the Trinity. I think a natural prima facie response to hearing, hey, you got an infinite and finite thing, is what most of the Muslims, let me finish,
Yeah.
which is what most of the Muslims do. They're not being particularly disingenuous, they're going, legitimately, it feels odd.
Do you not believe, though, for example, the Muslims that would say they're academic would be aware of the responses to which would properly address what we're saying?
Repeat that.
Okay, so you know what we say the Dawah script is, right? Within the path.
I don't know. That's
So the
probably
Dawah.
a very, very big.
Okay, so the whole idea is that we know that a lot of the speakers within the park know what I'm going to say in response to their critiques. Would you agree?
Yeah. Look, you guys, I'm glad that you've detached yourself from the money chain here, but there's a lot of money being made in this location by people with camera crews, and to a certain extent, the opposing teams need each other and want each other because it keeps the whole cycle going round and round. Now, I don't have a channel, I don't make any money, blah, blah, blah.
Me neither.
I'm not in that world. Well, you do have a channel, but which is
Well,
cool.
let's be honest to the camera.
I'm not knocking that you're having a channel, and I like that
Yeah.
you're not making any money from it. I'm just saying I don't.
I've been kicked out of college for a few months just because of the content what I make here. Like, I haven't actually benefited at all
Good for you.
from
Good for you.
this.
Good
In
for
fact,
you.
it's actually disaffected me because the college that I attend watches these videos and had took me out of my education a month before my exams.
Right. All I'm saying is you're not unaware that there is money being made.
Yeah.
Here. Okay,
and
right. So this environment, money is being made here. Money is often made by stoking conflict, yeah, and stuff which is kind of more. It's less cerebral, it's less honest, it's more derisory, it's bringing out the worst in human nature.
Listen, if you want to,
it's very tabloid.
If you wish to vocalise on this platform here a concern with the speakers in the park doing this for other reasons than being faithful to the faith to which they're trying to defend, you can do this right now.
No,
and then I know that your friends are trying to go to the pub, which you shout at.
I am just making that point, hoping we can agree on it.
I agree.
So one of the hot topics for these conflicts, which I think just drain people's spirituality and good faith, are them attacking the Trinity. Okay, it's a very easy attack for them to make. Most of the followers are convinced by the prima facie logic of their position. They're not going to get into the nuances that you believe, I don't think, the subtleties that you guys believe, and I think it's kind of wasted dead space. But I do think it makes a lot of money. I do think it creates a lot of friction, and I do think it's strategically not advantageous.
I do agree, and that's why there needs to be a certain vetting of speakers which speaks on matters of religion, because there's going to be lukewarm people of their faith, there's going to be people who are disingenuous, i.e. making money out of this, and there's going to be people who are just looking for an adrenaline rush, right? Causing division. I agree.
Good, we do agree.
So do you want to shake the hand and?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah?
I mean, good luck with it.
Yeah.
Congratulations for,
Not making money.
Not making money.
Yeah.
And following something you believe in, which is good. And you seem like you read a lot at 16. It's all very impressive. It sounds like you're thinking it through, and with respect, maybe less long words, pound for pound.
Yeah, but listen, it's an idiot which uses long words. A smart person can dumb it down.
Well, no, I do the same thing, because there are certain long words that do need using.
No, it's just,
Sometimes
I'm just very sporadic in my rhetoric, and I just like the way that some words sound sometimes, so it kind of just gets naturalistically put into the bank of words I'll use. So if you watch my videos, you'll notice that a lot of words which can be used in a sentence keep on being reused. And it's not because I'm intelligent, it's because I'm daft with my rhetoric.
Oh, okay. There are keywords that need using, like empirical,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
inference, and these are called...
But those aren't sophisticated words, those are just how we academically express the form of evidence to which we're referring to within a discussion.
Some people, if you use words like ontology and phenomenology, they instantly think that you're being too bloody highbrow. And I'd love not to use those words, but there are times when they're the only words you need. You have to nail these issues down.
I think it's been a good long discussion. I hope people are able to reflect and actually take something out of it.
Good,
with the ramblings of myself. I wish everyone...
Now we get live.
Yeah.
Let there be live.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I hope everyone has a happy new year. If there's anything you want to say in terms of how can people... you said that you spoke, so is there like a debate name or anything like this you can say of yourself so people can watch more of your videos?
Thank you. I've been around here a while. They'll have seen me. My name's Tony. I'm a Universalist. A lot of people think I'm an atheist. I'm a deist, not a theist.
All right.
Okay, which puts you in the camp of almost looking like an atheist.
Yeah, I would say it more comes off surface level as a cultural Christian. Like this whole sentiment that, and it's not to dish your position, rather just an assertion of what most people think of this deistic position of universalism, right? We don't know of God fully, but we know that the religions that speak of God, if done virtuously, can be accepted by Him.
Yeah.
It's seen as a cultural Christian approach, especially seen within society with people not being Christian but still believing in a God.
Right. I just happen to believe that there are good Buddhists out there who can find their way to heaven. There are good Muslims out there who can find their way to heaven, and there are good Christians who can find their way to heaven. And if you look at it that way, that's exactly the kind of framework a benign and loving God would probably create. One which enables you to climb the mountain from different routes. It's still the same mountain. It's one thing with one objective and one peak, but because human beings are standing around it from different cultural locations, you have different routes that you have to
Well, if I were to engage in this would be forever. So I'm going to end the conversation here. Okay. And yeah.
Okay. Cheers, Bob.
Yeah.
What are you called? Young Bob.
Yeah, Young Bob. Yeah.
All right.
It's not a bad name, but yeah.
It's not a bad name.
So essentially, I wasn't looking to have like a 3-hour conversation on deism and universalism. My major critique of that is just going to be if you can posit a God within reality, a negation of this God's existence, is this going to be blasphemous, which he said is just going to be discriminatory towards every person's position. Well, my response to that is having judgment or distinguishing a class to which is guilty or to which is wrong isn't seen immorally within the eyes of God. I mean, when God is casting judgment within the Old Testament, he isn't going to be saying, well, he's identifying a bad class here and a good class there, therefore he's not moral. This is just going to be a misunderstanding of what we believe when we say that God is identified with being righteous, with being loving, and with possessing judgment. Lastly, it's just going to be that this is a common critique which we kind of used a bit of sophistry and a bit more sophisticated words in saying that Christ can't be limited and unlimited if we say that this is true of exclusively his divine nature. Again, I apologize if any of the words here were a bit too big. It's my fault for being an idiot. A smart man can dumb down what he's saying to the audience, or at least make simpler what he's saying. And a stupid man is going to sound as intelligent as possible while using big words. So I already concede I'm a bit of a sophist. So God bless. Hope you have a happy New Year.
Hey, Bob, any messages to atheists who like to watch soccer films? Any final messages to them?
If that is the case, you're warming up towards the so-called channel. My primary recommendation is just going to be investigate the claims that the preachers are saying. If they're speaking favorably of Christianity, of a loving religion, investigate that within local parishes. Investigate what priests would say of the faith compared to what we say of the faith, because I am not going to be an accurate representation of the church itself. Rather, these positions are just going to be reflected upon how I personally believe this gives an account or defense of Christianity.
Right.
So that's me.
Bob. Well done, Bob!